Yeah, just thought I'd make a quick video about this whole thing with Eddie Bravo coming out and saying that BJ Penn should continue competitive fighting in the UFC, that he should just change his strategy and continue on because he's still, young enough and fit and all of this stuff to do it. I want to give my thoughts on that opinion, and this came after BJ Penn losing to Edgar last weekend for the third time, and this by knockout. And it came at a weird time for me because I've been reading BJ Penn's autobiography, Why I Fight, and I'm about like halfway through the book. In fact, I had read a chapter, and then I've been making videos on my notes and reflections and stuff on it. I'd read a chapter and put it down for a couple of days, didn't do my notes. I'm going to have to go back and revisit that chapter, and here this fight was coming up, and this was the fight that was kind of like the big season finale of Tough Season 19, where Penn and Edgar are the coaches, and BJ really was coming back into the UFC, specifically to fight this guy because he lost to him twice, and it was eaten at him that this was a challenge that he hadn't overcome. He'd never been able to beat this guy, so he thought he had a different strategy that was going to work to beat him. And just so happened that the day that this fight was going to occur, like I feel like, well, I wish I had finished off the whole book before this fight happened, but it didn't get to be that way. I did buy Tough Season 19, and I'd watched most of that season by the time this fight came around. But then it happened that the day that the fight was gonna go, that I had to be up in the mountains with my students for a few days. That was the first of the days I was going to be gone, and so I didn't get to watch it until afterward. So I checked it out, and kind of feel like you're reading, or like you skipped ahead to the last chapter of the book or something. It's going to really probably put a different slant on the rest of my reading of the book, but what I saw in that fight from the other weekend was not the same BJ Penn as I've been watching his early fights. As I'm reading the biography, every time I come to one of his fights, I go back on the UFC Fight Pass, the fight library, and I watch the fight that he's talking about in the book. And he was a much different BJ Penn than the one that was in the ring, in the octagon this last Sunday with Edgar. And you could just, he was a totally different guy. I mean, the fights I've been watching, his early ones, he used to just sprint down to the octagon and strip off his shirt and get in there, and he's ready to go right now. He's just twitching, and he's ready to fight right now. And this time, he just didn't seem to have any of that in him. It's kind of like it reminded me of the Rocky Balboa stuff in Rocky 3, where he's lost the eye of the tiger, and it really it's the heart that you could see, like his heart just wasn't in it. And in contrast, this Edgar sprinted down to the octagon and stripped off and went in and was ready to fight. I mean, even him, he didn't seem like he was really eye of the tiger, but he's definitely more ready than BJ. And then when the fight starts, you see the strategy that BJ's using, and it's so weird, it's so bizarre. I mean, he's up on his toes, like dancing, kind of moving around on the way up on his toes, standing very tall, head out, chin up, and all of this, and I don't know, in his guard, he's kind of like keeping him pushed back with his feet on his hip, on Edgar's hips and all this, and it wasn't working at all. Just seeing his stand up, you just thought, what happened? Because in those earlier fights, um, man, he was a totally different guy, and not just in the heart, but in the style, so different. And you just know that you're just seeing it right away. Like, I'd already heard the news that he lost, but just seeing the way that he was approaching the fight, standing out there with his chin up and stuff like that on his tiptoes, I could see that this was not going to be a good situation, and it wasn't. Um, Any case, he lost. He lost. This was going to be like his big thing where he finally beat this guy, and he lost, and it's, kind of sad and all that. but, um, but then, the controversy around the whole thing starts, and the talk, and this and that, and I'm contributing to that with this video, I suppose. And Eddie Bravo comes out and says, that he thinks it was just the wrong strategy, and he doesn't think that BJ Penn should retire. There's been a lot of issue around his retirement, and even after, right after the fight, BJ's like, yeah, I just shouldn't have even been in here, and Dana White was right, it's time for me to retire, time for me to be done with this and all of that. And but Eddie's Bravo's like, no, it's not time to retire, he's only 35 or whatever, he's still in really good shape. It's just that his strategy for this fight was terrible, and that's true. That's true. But what Eddie is missing is that he's not noticing that BJ Penn's heart is not in the fight, and I think that's significant. If his heart is not in the fight, if that's not what he really is, if that's not his whole life, what he really wants, and that's, if he's not, what would you call it, just totally consumed and passionate about the fight, then he shouldn't be in there. And the thing that I hear, like Eddie Bravo saying, is basically, all right, you're only 35, so you still got some years left on you as a fighter. You're only 35, you're still in really good shape, and yeah, so you should be fighting. Now, but if your heart's not in it, why should you be fighting? Why is it that a guy who is 35 years old and in really good shape can't just be a martial artist without the fighting, without the competition? And that's the thing. Like, this is the whole. Like, this is a big issue. With some of the people that I associate with, the discussion around this very issue. Why is it that that the martial arts and one's identity as a martial artist is today becoming so closely linked with this whole competition thing? Why is it that anybody needs to compete? I mean, if a guy is not into competing, there's a million other things to do with martial arts. And BJ Penn was a very good competitor when his heart and passion was there. But he's been the champion and the champion over again, and he's done it, and he's done. One thing that he hadn't done was beat this one guy, and so he was going to try to do that, but his heart wasn't really in it, and you could see it. And so why push him to continue? Why not encourage him to mature out of the competition fighting into the next phase of being a martial artist in a different way, in a way that doesn't involve competition? Because there certainly are ways to be involved in martial arts without any connection to this whole competition complex. And I'm not calling down the competition fighting. In fact, these days I'm just really have been paying a lot of attention to it, giving a lot of my attention to it, learning about it, learning you know, the people that are involved and the kind of different developments that have taken place in the decade or so, um, where I was less involved in martial arts. As the UFC grew and all of this stuff, a lot has changed, and I'm just playing catch up. And I'm finding very fascinating, um, the characters and the stories and the developments and what has happened and where we are, you know, today, and how I can integrate what's been learned into my practice. But I'm not a competition fighter and never would be, and I don't think anybody needs to be in order to feel good about themselves. And I hope that BJ Penn, if he's not competing, is not doesn't fall into that trap where either he doesn't feel good about himself, or he just or it's kind of like he's even now like chasing after this guy for the third fight. It's like he's living in the past, and you don't want to do that, man. You want to live in the now and what you're passionate about right now, and you could see that all the way through. From what I've read so far of his biography, you could see that he was always right now. He wasn't, when he had trained with one guy and it's time to move on, he's moving on to the next so he can get more training, he can become a better martial artist. He finishes, this competition, he gets this, he wins this title or that. It's time for the next bigger thing, and and so on. He was always, moving forward, and now it seems like, there was some kind of a retreat backward, and this attempted retreat backward ended up with bad consequences. And I don't think anybody like Eddie Bravo should be pushing him to continue retreating backward. I think the encouragement should become, okay, now be a martial artist without the competition fighting, and develop yourself to the next level. And I'd like to see these guys that are retired, these guys retiring from the UFC, whether it be Chuck Liddell, or whether it be George St. Pierre or Anderson Silva or whatever. I want to see them take it to a higher level without the competition. That would be, to me, that would be a challenge I'd like to see them take on. That's the next thing. That's the future. And I don't know who will be able to do it, but right now nobody is doing it. And I think it would be interesting to see if anybody can take on that kind of challenge, develop themselves to a higher level in the martial arts without competition. So that's my opinion, and I think Eddie Bravo is wrong to try to push BJ Penn into more fighting. He's just going to get him hurt.